I'd like to talk a little bit about semiconductors today, but mostly semiconductor ETFs, and especially which one is the best. And I've compiled a list of them here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? Yeah, 6 semiconductor ETFs. I did some research and I compiled the holdings, and I'm trying to run through, or I'll try to run you through my process of how I arrived at which semiconductor ETF is the best. But first, I think we have to start with why invest in semiconductors to begin with. And I was really inspired by, um, actually, it was actually this podcast. Well, actually, that's not completely true. We all know how important semiconductors are to modern technology and our modern life, and we didn't realize how susceptible our supply chains were, um, or how susceptible semiconductors were to the supply chain until in the past 1 or 2 years, because of supply chain disruptions. Um, this podcast was really good. It's from the Motley Fool. This podcast industry focus is discontinued now, but back then, back in 2021, when I listened to it, it made so much sense, gave me a lot of clarity, and it's about the value chain of semiconductors, aka of all of the hundreds of companies that um, participate in semiconductor design, manufacturing, distribution, etc. Like which ones go in which category and why do they exist? Um, so I'll put this in the notes description. And also, I listened to this podcast on TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, by this podcast called Acquired. It's 2.5 hours long, so not something you can necessarily listen to quickly, but it's really good as well. TSMC is one of the leading fabs or fabrications. They physically make the chips from after they're given a design by fabless companies, companies who don't have fabs. TSMC is leading the pack in 3 nanometers and in 5 nanometers too. Um, but I think it's a little hard to summarize audio formats. So I was reading this article earlier by a guy named Steve Blank. See if I can open this up. So he runs you through this pyramid of the semiconductor value chain. So at the bottom of the pyramid are companies such as, are the IP cores. So these include ARM, which which NVIDIA wasn't able to buy. It's still owned by SoftBank. You have companies like Synopsys and Cadence Design Systems. All of these companies, well, ARM's not public, but Synopsys and Cadence, they have market caps well into the double-digit billions. Moving up the chain, you have electronic design automation tools. See Synopsys and Cadence. Moving up, materials and subsystems. These include Air Liquid, Linde. Actually, don't know the other ones. I guess I know Dow. But all of these companies are providing the chemicals. Well, I know Linde and Air Liquid provide the chemicals, like the gases that are required, like nitrogen, neon. I heard apparently half of like half to 3/4 of the neon that's extracted from our planet comes from Ukraine. So, or I guess it was the Ukraine, Russia. I guess it would be Eastern Russia and like Belarus, that region, and that's causing some disruptions too right now. But okay, so moving up the value chain, now you have companies who make the wafer lab equipment. These include, I think, Lam Research, ASML, which makes the ultra UAV, ultra lithography, something like that. Applied Materials, KLA, and then so these are the people who actually manufacture, or they provide the equipment that's necessary to manufacture. And then now here are companies who are fabless. I'll mention this in a moment, but this trapezoid right here is companies that make their own chips as well. But fabless companies do not make their own chips. They design the chips for their specifications, and then they ship it out to foundries. So these include NVIDIA, Xilinx, which is now part of AMD, Qualcomm, Broadcom, and ARM. Actually, didn't know ARM was here. Actually, no IBM was a fabless either. But going down, the other, I guess the opposite of fabless companies are companies that do have fabs. So they manufacture and they design and manufacture. So these are called integrated device manufacturers, or IDMs. This includes Intel, which just got a new CEO, Pat Gelsinger, and he's trying to reinvigorate Intel. This also includes SK Hynix, a South Korean company, and Samsung, also South Korean, Micron, which is based in the United States, but they make memory chips, so not necessarily semiconductors, a little difference. Intel actually is pushing to become a manufacturer for some fabless companies as well. But at the very top are foundries, and these include Samsung and TSMC. TSMC is leading the pack, 100%. I don't know if it's a clear-cut winner compared to Samsung, but they're pioneering 3 nanometers right now. And the previous generation was 5 nanometers. Let's see. There's also SMIC. I think that's China. I think that's a Chinese company. UMC is based in Taiwan, as well. And Global Foundries is based in Austin, Texas. That is. I think Steve Blank here. Yeah. Only 2 foundries are at the leading edge. So, even though there are tons of foundries, and what is that? 2001, 2003. They've whittled down to just 2 that are leading the pack now. The reason is because the amount of expertise that's required once you get to a level like we need in 2020 to manufacture the chips is immense. And Moore's law says every 2 years the amount of silicon, or is it silicon? It's like the amount of transistors. Yes, the amount of transistors that can be fitted onto a semiconductor doubles every 2 to 3 years, which is crazy because that's an exponential progression as opposed to linear progression. But regardless of the innovations in semiconductors, one thing is for sure, and that is, I personally think this is almost an obvious trend that's very investable. The issue is it's really complicated. I know just a thing or two about some of these. It's really complicated to invest. So that's why I've decided to index this industry would probably be the best take. So close this. So If you just search Google for semiconductor ETFs, I'll just get rid of iShares, but you can see there are quite a few. So there's the Van Eck, and this is SOXX, no, SMH. There's the Invesco SOXQ. There's ETFs, semiconductor ETF. The problem is I didn't consider this one because it's listed on an Australian exchange. And I'm just looking at dollars. The iShares ETF is SOXX SOXX. And then this one, Horizons Global Semi, ticker CHIPS, is listed on the Toronto Exchange. So I didn't include this one either. The other three, let's see, the Spider S&P ETF is XSD, and then the remaining two, the ProShares USD and Direction, which is SOXL. These two I didn't consider because they're 3x leverage, or I think this one may just be 2x. Actually, I don't know, but either way, these two are leveraged, and that's not what I'm looking for right now. Maybe I'll do a video one day about the volatility decay or a beta decay that can happen when you hold a leveraged ETF over time. They may not necessarily be bad investments. In fact, I'm pretty sure SOXL has socked the market over the past I don't know, maybe not 1 year, 3, 5, and 10 years. Like it's a 10-bagger for sure. Well, I won't. Yeah. But the volatility that comes with this is incredible. Like this dropped, 43%. See, from pre-COVID to the depths of the crash, 80% down. But if you rode on the way up, wow, it's 15-bagger. Anyway, so I'll be sure to link these in the description. But so this is what we have. Now we have 6 ETFs left, and we got to consider which one is the best, right? Which one should we invest in? So one thing that is pretty interesting is if you look at the 1-year performance, they all look pretty similar. Of course, it's pretty rudimentary, and there's not like a definite scale that's associated. But if you just look at the general trend, they all look like the performance has been similar. And you know, even though this is an index, it actually is relatively volatile. If we look at the 5-year performance, they all look pretty similar still. This right here would have been the COVID crash. SOXL, this one is a relatively new ETF, so that's why its 1-year and 5-year charts look the same, because it's only been around for, well, not that long. And then PSI, crash, you know, all the very similar. And when I was in that face value, they are, and that's why I had to dig in, because I mean, you can choose one of them, but do you really know what you're getting? So, to me, I have a few considerations. So, number one, I do own some individual semiconductor companies. I own some Intel, I own some TSM, and I own a little bit of NVIDIA. So, I didn't want to buy an ETF that had huge weighting to any of these 3 holdings, because I'm already overweight as is, and if I get an ETF and those 3 holdings take up, I don't know, a quarter, then it's not as diversified as I really would like. Another consideration is, of course, the expense ratio. Let's see, the lowest is SOXX SOXQ. That's 0.19%. Usually Invesco funds are on the pricier side, but in this case, it's actually not too bad. Relatively speaking, it is the lowest. First Trust Nasdaq Semiconductor ETF, that wasn't even listed in the Google panel, and that by far has the highest expense ratio. And I'll talk about why that doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense. But these two are the most common ones, SOXX and SMH. 0.4, 0.35, so it's not too different, but SOXQ is the cheapest by far. Yeah, it's under 0.2%. And for me personally, that's I like cheap. I think that's not necessarily indicative of performance, cheapness, because sometimes you have to pay up for quality, but if all these underlying holdings are similar, this could be a differentiating factor. And lastly, the last facet that I approached evaluating these ETFs is the actual share price. Of course, share price, a small share price doesn't mean it's cheap, and a high share price doesn't mean it's expensive. But for me, I need to buy, my broker, the main one I use doesn't offer fractional shares, so I really like to be able to buy full shares at any given time. So $400 per share, that's a little pricey. SMH, that's still pricey, and SOXX at $25 is pretty reasonable. You can buy 1 or 2 or 4 shares at a time if you wanted to. That's not too big of a stretch. Let's see. This information was pulled a little while back, maybe a month back. I would update it, but right now Seeking Alpha is down. Let's see if it's still down. Yeah, internal server error, so that's not great. But let's just look at the holdings real quick. So of the top, this is of the how many percent the top 10 holdings make up. So 56%, 60%, 30%, 60, 47, 60. So I would say these three are in a very similar vein. The top 10 make up 60%. It's relatively concentrated. The other end of the spectrum is this XSD. If you look at the top 10 holdings, they're all about 3%, versus all the other ETFs, the top 3 holdings, the top 10 holdings are, well, the top holding is like 10%, and it goes down to like 4%, 3%. So XSD by far has the most diversification. And now if we look at the very top holdings, Broadcom, TSM, I'll skip XSD because as we talked about, it's really diversified. In fact, I'll move it to this side. Broadcom, TSM, Broadcom. I think a pattern emerges. In fact, if we search Broadcom, it's in every one of these holdings. Even in the one where it's not a top holding in SMH, it's a third holding. Okay, and then let's look at TSM, Taiwan. Yeah, TSM is in 3 of them. For me, I personally don't care if I have TSM in my top 10 because I hold it personally. However, if you don't have any semiconductor exposure, I personally think having TSM is a really good idea. Another company that I really wanted to have was ASML, which is a Dutch manufacturer. They make the machines that TSM buys, and I think I mentioned that here. It would be in here. No, wait, where is ASML? Should be here. Oh yeah, here it is. That's right, ASML. It's a Dutch company. Their machines go for like 150 million each, and I heard when they transport them, they have to break up the machines into pieces to fly them. And when they fly, they're accompanied by F-16 jets. So it's incredible. Unfortunately, only ASML is in. Only SMH holds ASML. So that's too bad. And then let's look at Intel. Intel's in all of them as well. 3% weighting here. And that's 6%, 5%, where's Intel? 8%, 6%, 8%. So Intel is pretty unescapable. Other than that, I think KLA is also a big holding. Yeah, in 3 of these. Applied Materials in 4 of these. I think Texas Instruments, yeah, in 4 out of 6. And then NVIDIA in 5 of 6. Interestingly, not in XSD. Let's see, Advanced Micro Devices in 3 out of the 6. Let's see, Qualcomm is in all of them. So 3% weighting here, 8%. Where's Qualcomm? Yeah, 5%, 9%, 5%, 8, 9% here. So a lot of overlap, to be honest. I honestly don't think there's that much differentiation, and I'm not at the level of expertise where I would be able to know which holdings are better than others. Of course, it depends on valuation and some idea of future growth, but that's hard to say. I mean, if I knew that knowledge, I would be straight up picking the stocks, but I'm not. With this in mind, I think I have settled on SOXQ as the best semiconductor ETF. To summarize, that's for a multitude of reasons. First, its expense ratio is the lowest, 0.19%. This, of course, is many basis points higher than like S&P 500 ETF, Vanguard ETF, S&P 500 ETF charges 0.03%. Like a Schwab mutual fund that tracks the S&P 500, SWPPX is charging 0.02%, and Fidelity even has like a 0%, like large cap ETF that tracks like the Fidelity 500 index. So not exactly the S&P 500, but close enough. Anyway, so it's a little bit expensive, but for the sake of exposure to semiconductors, I really do think it's worth it. Another consideration was the actual price. I want to be able to buy 1 or 2 shares and dollar cost average in over time, and that's more difficult to do when the price is $400. So if I spent the $400 a month, I probably wouldn't be able to buy another share for a little bit. Versus SOXQ gives me more flexibility. I don't care too much about looking at the past performance, because the performance, future performance is going to be indicative, or is going to be driven by the holdings of the ETF. And as we've seen, all of these holdings are relatively similar. I'm not too concerned about the concentration of the top 10. 61% is the highest of all of these. Not by far though, because I mean SMH FTXL are all around 60%, and SOXX is getting close. But I'm not sure exactly how many positions were here, and I can't check Seeking Alpha either. But it's 2025, and I think that's plenty diversified enough. I do have Intel, so that's one thing I don't love, to have double dipping, and NVIDIA as well, although I don't have very much NVIDIA. TSM, I don't like the double dip either. But all in all, I think it's pretty solid. I think I really like the exposure to Qualcomm, additional exposure to NVIDIA, AMD, Marvell, Micron, KLA, Applied Material, and Broadcom. I hear people talk all the time like, oh, AMD to the moon. Wall Street bets definitely, and a lot of and some super investors have also bought Qualcomm and Marvell. I do hear clamor about it. Micron, especially, the Manish Pabrai camp. So I guess the conclusion is, SOXQ. It's that's what I'm going to go with. I hope this was helpful. If this was, please do what you will do. And I'll be sure to leave all these links in the description. Okay, peace.